Right, so LEGO Zelda's been taking off LEGO ideas, and that could potentially be a sign that it's in development. But then again, maybe not. Regardless of that, I'm here to save the day, because it's okay, LEGO. I understand that coming up with ideas can be difficult, or maybe you're not sure if there's enough content for you to make LEGO Zelda sets about. So here are 103 set ideas for you. And guess what? You know how you only want to make relevant things? So all of these are from Breath of the Wild, only and exclusively. If you want more ideas, I've got like another 400 in my pocket from the rest of the franchise. But I thought we'd take it easy today. So, just to clarify, these are all ideas that I believe could have promise as a set. Don't take them literally, but with some creative minds, they are all viable products. And if you think you know of any other ideas that I've missed from this game specifically, put them down in the comments, and you never know, I might make it as a custom set before LEGO does one day. I won't be making all of these as customs in the future, but a couple of them are little sneak peeks ahead in the custom set showcase, so I wonder which ones you would want to see. And then most importantly and lastly, before we get straight on in, this doesn't represent my personal desires for a LEGO Zelda theme, as I would love classic game representation more than anything. But just in case LEGO decides that Ocarina, Skyward or Twilight Princess isn't culturally relevant enough, just like Mark Stafford said about the DC line, I thought we'd better stick to modern ideas for today. So without any further ado, I present 103 LEGO Legend of Zelda custom Breath of the Wild set ideas. So, starting us off with number one, we of course are going to jump all over the map today, and I have chosen to start with Rito Village. Very simple concept, playset including some houses and a little bit of rock work. It's more of a dollhouse style playset with a couple of Ritos and Link in an outfit. Followed by this we have a battle pack which would include maybe one hut, potentially the guard post outside of the village, as well as 3 to 4 of the Rito warriors with different outfits, different weapons and different colours. The birds come in brown, green and blue, I believe. Next up is the flight range, a location slightly to the north. This one's a nice easy one, small set using the new bow mold introduced in the Avatar set that can fire, a couple of targets to practice shooting and the little hut with some snow, maybe a tree or two. Before, we've got an extra 4 ideas here, and don't worry, these only count as 1, so this isn't taking away from my 103 ideas. You could either sell them separately or together, but buildable champions in a similar style to the £30 Iron Man from last year, however, better made, just a little bit more functional, maybe looking a little bit better, somewhere between Bionicle and the new System Construction line. It'd just be cool to have them as action figures, really, even if it's as display pieces. And next up we have one of the 4 Divine Beasts, which of course we'll be coming back to. This is Var Meadow. I'm imagining a large scale playset here, where you can sweep it around like a Star Wars ship, similar size to the Justifier. Of course, all microscale details, you'd have some quick puzzles on the inside, and potentially the blights. And then we have Pondo's Lodge, which is basically just an excuse to have a set based around bowling. So include 9 pins, Pondo, Link, and a little hut as well. Or maybe don't, just do the bowling pins and do it as a poly bag. Multiple options there. Next up, in a similar line to the champions, we have a buildable Link, similar to the Jack-specific action figure. This could either be as a display set like the Mighty Bowser, or it could be more playable like an action figure like a Bionicle. There's some mocks circulating around. This could either be Champions Tunic or Classic Link, as either appear in Breath of the Wild, so it's not a classic idea. And then following this, we have a buildable Sheik Estate. It could either come with the pedestal or not, but it's an iconic item from the game that I'm sure fans would love to have on their shelf. And then we have Breath of the Wild flowers. This is an idea I came up with. I think the flowers in the game are particularly iconic, especially the Silent Princesses, and would make for an interesting addition to the botanical collection, acting as video game flowers or representation of video game media in the botanical lineup for all those fans of the game. And I think they would look lovely in a pot, especially if a proper designer designed them instead of me. Next up, similar vein, we have materials, thinking to the Hogwarts Collector's Edition with the giant Hedwig and all the potions bottle. Wouldn't it be lovely to have like representations of spicy peppers or butter or wheat or any of the ores just in like a pile, and you could put these iconic items from the game over a shelf around your other sets. A little wacky idea that I came up with on the side. But coming back to the more important ones, we have the Bottomless Swamp. It's one of the more creative of the enemy camps, and I think it would make a really interesting set, especially if you had all this brown goop around the bottom, and then this very interesting skull build. And then, of course, we have the Breath of the Wild stables, which has been illustrated beautifully by Handel's Yellow First on ideas, and of course the many knockoff versions that have since appeared. However, this was an ideas project that reached 10k and was failed. It's an iconic part of Breath of the Wild, being fully focused on horses, and would make a great standalone set. Next up we have the labyrinths. This would obviously not be a full scale thing, but more like a couple of wall segments or maybe rearrangeable segments done as a smaller scale set, where you could just have a couple of enemies around the corner, but they do have a really unique artistic style, and you could follow this up by doing the Guardian thing for underneath the Lemay Labyrinth in Akala, where you can go and get the travel medallion. Following this, we of course just have a Guardian, sell it as a set. That's what I did in the custom. It could include a couple of ruins, but could also just be a Guardian on its own. Next up though, we have the Bridge of Hylia. We've got to go through these fairly fast today, and this is of course a very easy one to turn into a set. Not the whole thing, shrunk down version maybe, or even just the pillars. Maybe it doesn't need the ends, or maybe just one end. A couple of Lizalfos, and then a couple of Korok puzzles. A very nice and simple display set. Then you've got another 3 options here with all 3 of the dragons. Could be sold separately, could be a 3-in-1, or you might only do Naedra because, well, Naedra's the most iconic one. But of course dragons are cool, kids love dragons, make them into a set. And then of course we have the Sheikah Tower, which would be a very vertical set, potentially interesting structurally wise, maybe like a £40 to £50 set just of the build itself. It's sort of just a play set really, it works as a concept and again very iconic. Then of course even more iconic is the Shrine exterior. I see this one as more of a display set as there's not much playability on the outside, but if you could get all the shaping down right, adults would definitely buy it to have on their desk. Followed by the Ancient Ruins, which I see as more of a playset version of the shrine, specifically near to Bantha. It's more of like a landscape set with a couple of enemies, maybe an explosion play feature or a Korok or something, but just sort of an exploration set based off one of the more interesting landscapes I think we have in the game. Followed by the Village Ruins. I see this set including a Wizrobe or a Guardian, and including some of the burnt out husks of village buildings, a couple of hidden treasure chests maybe an Octorok feature, and a couple of trees, and you've got a nice Fire Wizrobe commits arson set. Next up we have the Combat Shrine Trials. This I see as a £10 set, just with a couple of pillars and a Guardian, or even as polybag, just to include the giant battle axes and represent, well, the 20-something shrines that are like this in the game. Followed by a Korok puzzle, which in my eyes is the definitive polybag, either the Rock Circle or the Dive Ring puzzle, where you just get a Korok and his puzzle. It's nice and simple. Following this we have the Shrine Interior, which I did a version of where you could rearrange different components commonly found in Sheikah shrines in order to make your own custom challenges, either something like this or something more rigidly based off one of the existing shrines, probably something like Trial of Power or the one where the thing comes through the boxes. I don't remember their names, but anyway, the shrine's interiors are pretty iconic. Getting the monk in his little cell would be lovely, as well as the opportunity to include some of the more sort of repetitive elements of the game, however also just including some of these unique elements that people remember from their playthrough. Next up we have Zora's Domain, of course referring to the village, a 60 to 70 set. Basically just another dollhouse, just like Rito Village, but of course including the giant fish sculpture and a lot of the blue aesthetics. It's a very unique place, would be interesting to see how they would turn it into a set, and of course an opportunity to get lots more Zora. However, another opportunity to recreate some of the really lush landscapes found around Zora's Domain would be a set based off the Sidon Escort, or well, Sidon escorting you up the Zora River, including one of the bridges, some of the electric Lizalfos, an Octorok, and then of course some of these lovely coral plants that go around these lovely blue mountains. Very unique geography that I think could make a really nice £30 to £40 set. Following this we have the Lizalfos Battle Pack, a way to go build your monster enemies from Breath of the Wild. Battle Packs do really suit the enemies from Zelda in general, and the Breath of the Wild Lizalfos are my personal favourite iteration of the Lizalfos, and they come with this little encampment here, which I think is really useful because that is another location that we can turn into a set. Following this, of course, we have the Moblins. Moblins can be included in a battle pack, maybe with Bokoblins, or just 2 Moblins on their own. I like the idea of it being a snowy themed one, so you could get some snowy trees potentially, or maybe part of the skulls that they sometimes live in. And then of course the other type of camp being the Bokoblin battle pack, including lots of different scaling varieties of your Bokoblin in a grassy forest with the meat on a spit and the watch out towers, which I think would complete the basic monster lineup for this game. Following this then of course we have Kakariko Village. I mean, it's not a particularly logical next step, however it is a very important location in game, and it would be nice to get a couple of the houses, a couple of the trees, and maybe the pumpkin patch in a set form. And also Hateno Village, the same thing goes. The architecture again here, very unique. We've got the windmill, one of the buildings, and potentially even just some smaller like little builds for the little shacks or the cooking pots, an apple tree or something. Again, more Doll's House play sets. You don't have to build all of them, but it's another idea on the pile. Next up, we have the tech labs. Would be an interesting opportunity to include Pure or Robbie. I don't see doing both, just pick one and go with it. Make a little fun interior where you could potentially download runes or something. Maybe there's a hammering play feature to make the ancient armor. Cherry could be included, and you've got this cool telescope outside, a couple of Korok puzzles, and maybe the blue flame becomes an interesting component where it sort of turns the building on, or there's moving things or something inside. Could definitely be turned into an interesting playset of a building, maybe cut open back. Following this, of course, Tarrytown, including the central fountain and then the really unique building style here. There's some great mocks of these on Rebrickable, however, put them at a slightly smaller scale and flesh out the interiors, and you've got yourself a wonderful little playset. Next up, we have another battle pack wing of the Stal enemies for the Bokoblin on a horse, Stal Koblin, the Stal Levzalfos, and the Stal Moblin, all iconic enemies that deserve to be represented. Easiest way is to put them all together here, and especially including the skeleton horse would bring a lot of people in. Next up, the Molduga could be a set on his own, give Link a Sand Seal and the Molduga and maybe a couple of desert cactuses, and we're on a roll here. And then, of course, next, we're going through all the mini-bosses, we have the Talus, and of course this is, again, just a standalone build, 50 to 60, maybe a little tree and some mushrooms, and then Link to break him down with a hammer. Of course, then the third one, a Hinox, red, blue, black, any variant you like. He's definitely buildable as a large scale character. You could put an orb around his neck or weapons, and you can just have fun trying to murder the Hinox. Next up is the last of the mini bosses, which is the Lionel. Again, works well as a standalone set. You could do this as a display set or as a play set. You could give him a big stud shooter for his bow, so he could launch giant competition arrows at you. Again, just a little bit of terrain, maybe not even that, maybe just a Lionel in the box. Next up, the Colosseum. If you wanted to mix some of these elements together, maybe not do a line on the own, you could do a Colosseum sort of wall segment, include a couple of the Zalfos from the second tier up, and then a Lionel. Maybe you could even break the Colosseum like wall to make Link fall down. You could include the Phantom Armor, or you could go full scale and do a giant Colosseum, but personally I see it as a slightly smaller thing. Next up, we have the Temple to Time. This could be a giant D2C, or it could be a slightly smaller set, just focusing on the goddess statue within. Easy inclusion for King Rome. You could include his little camp off to the side. You could include all the stuff out the front. However, I think this one works best as a 150 to 200 pound set, just focusing on the main building. Following this, we have the Shrine of Resurrection from the beginning of the game. This works as a playset, 60 to 70, just following every event leading to you going outside and doing the iconic intro cutscene, or it could be a display set of just this room or the shot you can see on screen now, where we're focused on the waterbed and how iconic that initial scene is. Next up is the Final Trial. Be interesting to see them attempt a playset based on this, very similar to the Shrines, but specifically talking about this portion of the Final Trial being the final dungeon, not the final boss fight, where you can interact with all the objects and maybe a couple of the puzzles are iconic enough to be turned into a small set. Next up, we have the Blights. These could either be sold individually together or as a 4-in-1 polybag, as I did. Wind Blight, Water Blight, Fire Blight, and Thunder Blight definitely have their own iconic preferences, and people tend to prefer them, so I'd like to see them sold together. But they're definitely another set idea to add to the pile. And then, of course, Calamity Ganon. As a standalone display set, you could do him as 100 to 200, just like Bowser, or you could do him as a smaller 50 to 60 play set, or you could do him as a polybag, or he could be inclusion in a Hyrule Castle set. Either way, he's iconic and needs to be in this set lineup. Following that, of course, is Dark Beast. He's an easy 50 to 60 large-scale set, similar to an 8080, but a little bit more squat. My mind actually goes to the White Tusks Elephant set from Monkey Kid this year, is about the right proportions to make this boar. Following that, we're going into the castle now. We've got a couple of sets to list off, so starting this off, we've got the Hyrule Castle Sanctum. Could include Ganon, but mainly focused either on the interior or the top portion of the tower, where the battle actually takes place. Or you could do a giant castle at 500 plus, just like the Disney castle. You could focus on as much of the castle as you could fit in, but trying to get all of those really, really neat details, not focusing on interior as much, and just getting the iconic shapes of the castle. Following this, you could also do a smaller set based on the dining room and a modular Hyrule Castle playset style where you can merge things together. So this one based off the dining room. Another one based off just Hyrule Castle interior rooms in general, following by outside wall segments, the gatehouses, and the Hyrule Castle entrance, and then the prison. Rounding out our castle builds that could all connect together or just be individual sets that focus on specific locations within the castle. Then there's also Castle Town in its destroyed state, either from Age of Calamity or from the modern day, Guardians roaming around, husks of buildings, treasure chests to unlock and the fountain, or you could do the non-destroyed castle from the flashbacks or the earlier missions of Age of Calamity, where you've got the markets and the luscious blue roofs in the interior, based off the Yiga Clan Attacks mission from Age of C, or any of the flashbacks. It could just be like a cutesy playset. Next up, Varuta, moving on to the Divine Beast. Again, see this very similar to a Squat 8080 or the White Tusk Elephant. A couple of puzzles on the inside, but mostly focused on the outside, and being able to move the beast around to cause havoc. Again, very similar to the Star Wars 8080s. Then you could also do the Divine Beast as a miniature form, as a microscale set, just like the Microfighters from Star Wars, and include their champions as a pilot. Next up, Goron City, another of the city builds with unique architecture, works as a nice place set to include some Gorons and also the iconic shops. Following this is the Igneo Talus encounter. Now I know this one's a bit of a rip-off seeing as we already had a Talus and the variants would count, however I'm thinking of that Pacific Talus encounter on your way to Goron City, which I think makes for a nice standalone set. There's an iconic moment similar to the Naja battle which people run into. There's sort of like a cliff wall, so you could almost include this wall and then this Igneo Talus that's trying to pin you down. I also think the colour scheme's unique on here, but don't expect to see the Frost Talus on here on this list. Next up, the Goron Mines, the section where you go and rescue Unibo. The cannons would make for an interesting set, along with maybe one of the enemy encampments which you can blow up, similar to how I did in the Take Back the Sea custom. You could also include the little cave where you find him, and maybe some breakable gems to try and get rich along the way. Next up, the Death Mountain Trail, specifically focused on the stealth segment, where you could have a couple of the sentries. I see this as a very small set, 15 to 20, just including Link in the Framebreaker, Unibo, a cannon, and a sentry to avoid. And then, of course, Varu Dania, again, is a large-scale animal set. This one's a little bit more tricky, potentially the hardest of the four. The closest thing I can think of would be the Queen Spider's Arachnoid base from Monkey Kid. However, the colour scheme and obviously proportions are completely different. But I'd like the lizard's arms to be able to move as you go along the floor. That could be the main feature. Then you could just have a little interior of the puzzle and, of course, the Fireblight battle. Then, of course, just like all the other races, we need a Goron battle pack using some of these Gorons from the city, mixed in with some of the ones with their helmets, maybe including the Eldor or ones with beards, but also just the general like miners with the pickaxes and yellow hats. And then, of course, the last race that needed one, a Zora battle pack, including some of the soldiers with the armor and the spears, and then just some of the workers, maybe with a hammer that's trying to repair the city, and maybe including someone like Muzu as a one-off, although that sort of defeats the point of a battle pack. And a Gerudo battle pack, of course, including the Gerudo warriors, the Gerudo citizens, and maybe one of the more special citizens like the Jeweler, Isla. However, again, probably just the better option is just to have two soldiers with different weapons and then two citizens with varying colours of their outfits. Then we have a Yiga battle flag to contrast against the Gerudo one, two foot soldiers, a blade master, and maybe Suga, or maybe it's just a second blade master. You could have a foot soldier with a bow, two foot soldiers with a sickle, and then the blade master with his giant sword. Then in Gerudo Town, you could just have a set based off the whole town, trying to get the general like shaping of it. You could have it open up in the middle to expose the market, or the big tower at the top as well with the throne room. You've also got the Yiga hideout, which would make a pretty interesting set. It could be of almost any size. You could go really, really small and just include a couple of the pillars to hide behind and a couple of troops, or you could go really, really big and do a full-on play set of just like the entire main room. Then you've got the Koga Battle, which could be sold as a smaller or simpler 15 to 20 pound set, which just includes Link, Koga, and the balls to fight around, maybe a little bit of terrain. Or Koga's about the only one in the game that I think could work as a bust style set. I just think the mask is iconic. It's obviously the Yiga, which is the Sheikah symbol upside down. None of the armor sets particularly stood out to me. The only one I was almost tempted by were the Divine Beast helms, however I thought they'd be a little bit tricky. So Koga makes the idea of Zelda busts a reality. Next up, large scale 18 plus Hylian shield. They'd never do the sword because it's a weapon, however the shield is not a weapon, it's about defense. This could easily hang on the wall, be giant, be small, most likely giant I think. Next up, Korok battle pack, 6 or 7 small Koroks and a little tiny side build. You can get more in there because they're much smaller than normal figures. Next up, Choo Choo battle pack again, 3 normals, 2 fire, 2 ice, 1 electric, something like that, where you can just create lots of Choo Choos of different size. It'd be nice to have a feature where they could break apart, maybe requiring a new mold. That's not a bad idea actually. And then maybe a little bit of terrain, maybe just a tree or something, just to give a little bit more than just a load of choo-choos in a box. Next up, Master Cycle Zero. I see this as a larger 18 plus style set, maybe 120, 150, in the style of the Harley Davidson Fat Boy, so basically just a large Creator Expert style motorcycle based off Master Cycle Zero. And then at a smaller scale, we've got the Monk Maz Koshia Final Battle, where you get the Master Cycle Zero, which I see as a small 20 to 30 pound set with the enlarged version of Maz Koshia fighting off against Link. Next up, the actual AT-AT of the Divine Beast, which is actually quoted in game, we have Varnaboris, who would literally just be an AT-AT with a really long neck. You'd have an interesting interior where you'd be able to have the Thunderblight fight happen on the interior, maybe you're able to spin around the implanted rooms, or put electric orbs in different places to to press down a switch or something. Some puzzles on the inside, but basically just a glorified AT-AT. Definitely the most likely of the 4 beasts. Then you have the opportunity to do a sand seal race, where you can put Link and 2 sand seals, put Charbonne and Tali on there, a couple of gateways to pass through, and maybe an enemy to try and distract them, as well as the pedestal. Very nice set. I could see that one working really, really well. Then you've got the 7 heroine ruins, potentially one of the more stretching ones, but you would just include one of the heroines and then some puzzles or some ladders to climb up, just sort of environmental play around it. Maybe include some weight switches so that you could like shoot up and down to like avoid enemies, or like weigh things up and down on like a tilty platform. You know, just include some of those Gerudo like walkways that go around the canyon. Next up, the giant horse hunt. I just see this as a small set with the giant horse, the horses, and maybe some Bokoblins, a Lionel maybe, and the baobab trees that appear in that area, which obviously is not what you're seeing on screen, but mostly just the giant horse and his environment, which is again is very unique. Nice small sets available to you for Breath of the Wild. And then similar thing with the horseback combat, Link on a normal sized horse and some targets to go shoot at and some things to jump over, merging the horseback archery and horseback jumping games together. Next up, we have the beaches from Breath of the Wild, specifically thinking Aris Beach. This could either be the Guardian encounter that happens down there, the Hinox encounter that happens down there, the Stalnox encounter. It could be anything, or just one of the many encampments that are on the beach, or just smaller enemies. It could just be a Lizalfos fighting near a palm tree set, or it could be a raft on the ocean. Who knows? Lots of options open to you on the beach. Next up, another battle pack, Hylian Travellers. They're everywhere, just a couple of different ones. The idea being that you could mix and match them, so you could buy more than one set and you'd be able to mix the components up to make coherent looking different travellers from all over Hyrule. Maybe one stable worker, one like the one traveller with a backpack, and then one two civilians, maybe a child as well. Next up, another battle pack, of course, the Hylian Soldier battle pack, basically just including 3 or 4 of the traditional soldier units with their different weapons, and maybe one without the helmet or something like that. And then a build for maybe a garrison, one of these pillars, or some supply crates. And then a Royal Guard battle pack, which would still include 2 soldiers, but also 2 Royal Guards, specifically designed to escort King Rhoam around the castle. So again, the builds would probably be more armor racks or things associated with the castle, but it's just a nice exclusive way to get one of the best armor sets in the game. Next up, Lurelin Village. This could either be Lurelin Village centered or half and half, where we have the Take Back the Sea quest to get rid of this enemy encampment in Aris Bay. So you could either just do a load of Lurelin houses, or you could include the monster encampment. And then, of course, that brings us to the other coastal event, which being Eventide. Again, just a set based off Eventide rather than the entire island. However, that's up to the designers how they want to interpret that. Then you've got a Korok for a set. This could include the Master Sword, it could not, it could be wider, it could just be based around the luscious interior to Korok Frost with all the nice things in Hestu. You've also got Link's House, another good option for custom. Farron Woods, where you could have some palm trees. I'm specifically thinking of the Serpent Tail quest, where you have to get to the Shrine of Courage, and there's lots of enemies shooting you from above. I think the dragon statues would make a cool thing. You could explode one, you could have enemies up on the cliff, you've got the water where you could get electrocuted and so on. I just think that area is a really, really nice aesthetic. You could have a giant buildable Korok, similar to the buildable Porg or BD1, and he would just be big, and you could exchange out the masks to get a different Korok to be your favourite. Then you've got the military camp, the area in Breath of the Wild, of course, where the tower is. So this could either include the tower or just all the broken down pillars. It's very jumbly, it leads to nice explosion features, some whiz robes, and some Bokoblins, of course. Then you've got the Master Sword pedestal as a nice small set based off, well, just the Master Sword. And then the Lost Woods, where you actually get lost, so a couple of spooky trees, maybe a Magnesis orb to follow the way, some birds, maybe a Stalkoblin or something, and a torch to light the way, just a nice small set. And then you've got Kilton's Shop, just a build of Kilton's Shop, either display or play orientated. Again, 20 to 30 of this iconic character and his shop. You'd get the monster masks or maybe the spring-loaded hammer. And then we also have the Gerudo Town Market. I know we already had Gerudo Town on this list, but I can see a much smaller set, 20 to 30 again, involving all of the shops around the market. So just like the armor store, the jewelry store, and the fruit market. Very, very colourful, nice awnings, just makes for an interesting set. And then, of course, onto the enemies again. We have a large-scale Stalnox, similar to the Hinox. Structural integrity might be a problem on this one, so they might want to go smaller or include them in another set. However, it is a unique set idea. And then we also have the Akala region, again, main as a landscape set. Maybe this is the backdrop to a Guardian or something, or a fairy fountain, but I just love the autumn aesthetic, and I think there's a lot of unique locations which could be well represented. Maybe this is even the background for the Moblin Battle Pack, where you have the Blue Flame quest, which runs into a lot of black moblins up at the top of the Tumela Heights. You've also got the Great Skeletons, which are another fairly memorable location, which could be turned into a backdrop for a battle pack playset, or encounter with a Lionel or Moblins or Bokoblins, or it could just be another enemy encampment or a location to explore. There's a couple of Korok puzzles around here. It could just be another small landscape set where it's just included in the background. You've also got Akala Tower being a larger scale playset with the actual full tower, and then maybe the Sheikah Tower at the top. But mostly the fortress is pretty cool. We saw the interior of Age of Calamity, so we could always open up like a dollhouse as well. You could also include a Skywatcher. We can see how that one would go. Then you've also got Satori Mountain. Again, small scale set, Cherry Blossom Tree for collectors, and of course the Lord of the Mountain Mount, 10 to 15, or it could be larger if you wanted to include the apple orchard or other things of features of the mountain. You've also got Impa's house from Kakariko Village, so again, rather than just focusing in on the village as a whole, you could just go for her house and just do the full interior, like some of the mocks we can see on the internet. We also have Fort Hateno, where they make the last stand, so this could either be based off the memory or how you find it in the present. Another playset location which you could connect to the castle if you wanted to, could include the graveyard at the back with the exploding statue and the hut, or it could just be the wall segment with the Korok puzzles and maybe a couple of enemies to attack. And penultimately, we have the Dueling Peaks. Again, not the whole landmark, but I can imagine this being a small set with Link and the climbing bandana. Maybe this is including the Talus. Again, it's just a nice iconic backdrop, which is well represented in the name, for you to like pass through these tall rocky cliffs or something. Or maybe it's shrunken down and just it looks just really good. We'll see. And then to finish us off for today, we have the Old Man's Cabin on the Great Plateau, one of the only recognisable locations on the Great Plateau besides the Temple of Time. I just think it works well as a rundown hut. It's a location. You can include the old man cutting the trees, the little chasm. He's got some mushrooms on his table, a little bent, basically another opportunity for Link to play house, just like he would have in his own house. And that actually brings us to the end of our 103 custom sets to take a look at today. I hope you enjoyed this little look through. If I missed anything, let me know. Your favourite ideas for me to turn into sets would also be much appreciated. And let's get this one around. Let's show LEGO that there is options for them to create. So many options. Why are we still waiting again? Also, don't take this as an excuse to only do Breath of the Wild sets. If I don't get Skyward Sword, I will cry. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.